NFL week number 9. I'm here with Ron. We got a bunch of stuff we're going to be talking about, and we're not going to sell you anything and ask you to subscribe or any of that nonsense. So let's get right into it. Ron, first let's take a sidetrack. I just noticed there's 2 NCAA games tonight, or there's 3. You have any opinion on either of these 3 games?
The only opinion I have is I'm watching the line movement on Ohio and Miami of Ohio. My data says it would be a play at +3 for Miami of Ohio.
Huh. I like the Ohio side of that.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I was leaning the Ohio side.
Yeah, that's the only. You have any opinion on the other 2? I do not.
Toledo is no, I'm not going to do that with Toledo. I've had that banana peeling before. Yeah, so all right, so we're divided in Ohio, Miami of Ohio. I don't know whether I'm going to play it or not. I was hoping for some validation and some confirmation, so we're going to skip that. Let's get into the NFL. I've got the headline NFL swings of oddity, or the year of oddity. And I think if there's one thing everybody can agree on this year is this is one messed up season. Would you not agree with that?
As you eat your popcorn.
I'm hungry.
Or spill it. It's a strange year in a lot of respects because a lot of the younger teams are growing up in a hurry, and we don't know if it's smoke and mirrors or not smoke and mirrors. Seattle and the Jets had dynamite drafts, but those aren't supposed to work right away, but they are. The Giants had a tremendous coaching change, and it is working, but it might be smoke and mirrors given their roster, given the metrics even. You have some of the top teams like Green Bay, perceived top team at the beginning of the year, that's not doing much of anything. So every year is its own strange thing, but this year there may be more divisional changes in terms of who's winning the division. Minnesota's up by 4 games. Indianapolis had the AFC's expected easiest schedule at the beginning of the year, and now they have a coaching change. So the AFC West was supposed to be dynamite, and it's the NFC East that has the better record. And New England's in last place, but they're 5-4. Interesting.
I think there was an interesting statistic that I saw this morning that there have never been more games at this point in the season decided by 7 or fewer points.
Right.
And it's remarkable that the Wong teasers are a loser. Scoring is down, and you have the most scores under or within 7 points. I mean, that's just bizarre. How can all 3 of those be true at the same time?
Yeah, it's pretty strange. And I don't know, there's a million factors going on. One of which is, we've talked about them a lot. First of all, you got 17 coaching changes, 15 to 17 coaching changes in the last 2 years. So half the league practically has new coaches. Then you have this week off between preseason and the regular season. So nobody knows who's playing, who's ready. You mentioned the stat of 11 quarterbacks didn't play a down, adjusting to different rule changes, adjusting to pace and play. And I think one thing we haven't talked about as much is the fact that these cover 0 or cover 2 zones that are going on, they're forcing teams to go down the field. We have more running quarterbacks than we've ever had. We have 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks that might run for 1,000 yards this year. And with these mobile quarterbacks, it's changing the pace of play of the game. It's changing who's running up scores and who's not, but it's also fewer plays per game. And if you look at some of these teams just babying some, last night's an example.
Why is there fewer plays per game?
A lot of runs, a lot of quarterback runs, a lot of short passes. The completion percentage is the same as it's always been, but they're shorter passes. You look at last night's game. What did Lamar Jackson throw? 20 passes, 22 passes. Andy Dalton threw 28 passes, maybe. I mean, you don't have these quarterbacks throwing as many passes unless your name is Tom Brady, who threw enough passes for 3 games worth.
I'd like to turn the topic a little bit to the betting. And we talked about this preseason about how there's been a lot of success by people that have been using situational handicapping and trends and feel and whatever methods that they have. And they've been doing, pretty darn well last year and the year before. And I spoke about it before the season started that I said, I think that party's going to end. And sure enough, I've been seeing indications of that where there's people struggling this year. And it just brings it back to me that I don't know. I can guarantee you one thing: as successful as I've been with NFL over, a long period of time, I would have no hope of being a winning bettor in the NFL if I did not have some sort of a metric foundation to refer to at the start of every week. There is just an absurd amount of stuff that your lying eyes are not going to give you. And I know that you do more of a manual power rating type base, which is fine also, as long as you're good at it. But do you firmly agree, partially agree? What are your thoughts on how you start when you start a week of NFL handicapping? Would you feel as lost as I am without your process and what you do? Because I know I'd have no hope of winning if I didn't have this.
Well, like you mentioned, betting on feel. One should never bet on feel as their sole indicator of how to bet. The thing about situational handicapping, and like I've said before, I do 3 things, and not one of them is a standalone method. Power ratings to know when I have value. And I've done power ratings for 40 years, and the formulas haven't changed. So I know how to do them, and I know how to create them and all that. Metrics, knowing we may value, you and I, different categories, but we value a lot of categories, and we weigh that into the equation. And each week is different. You know this. Hopefully our viewers are starting to learn this. What works against one team may not work against another team, depending on what's going on. So I got the metrics, I got the power ratings, and I got the situations. And I'm telling you right now, as much as I like some situations, if you rely on the same situations year after year after year without understanding how to chuck them when they're no good anymore and understand when new coaching staffs and schemes come in, then you're in trouble. You constantly have to evolve with everything you do, including situations. Maybe more important with situations. So other than weeks 1 to 3 and weeks 15 to 17 or 16 to 18, I have fewer team situations than I've ever had in my life because of all these coaching changes, rule changes, and so on. I still have some general situations based on how teams are doing, but the situations are dwindling, and I think that's obvious that they should dwindle based on the NFL being such a business of changing coaches and schemes and everything. There's just not enough. And when I see sample sizes of 7 and 2 after this and 5 and whatever, I mean, Cris, we talk about it in college. I have sample sizes with running data that are 1,400.
Right.
I don't want to deal with a sample size that's 17.
No, I agree. And it's, I'm scrolling that I suck at betting lately. And I actually had my most profitable week in the NFL this past week. And I'm the most disappointed that I have been in years with myself, because I've had 2 weeks recently that I just have bet poorly. And, hey, I'm supposed to be a pro. I'm supposed to know the ins and outs. I'm supposed to be automated. This season is so odd. and the circumstances that you find yourself in. I mean, Seattle on a winning streak, going into Arizona. I didn't want any part of betting Seattle, but I'm supposed to bet Seattle, and I did end up playing. I ended up betting them a variety of strange ways, and I got involved in a layered teaser at idiotic numbers, and all this stuff did well, but just I'm off my game because, as you kind of inferred, there's a lot of situational aspects of the games that are being played that aren't applying this year, and you got to throw them out, and they're tough. If you've been betting the NFL for 10 years, you're so familiar and it's so ingrained in you that an Aaron Rodgers off of a loss is going to go into Detroit and just manhandle them. Or a Seattle that already beat Arizona once goes into Arizona that desperately needs a win and is getting less than 3 points. You don't want any part of them. Jacksonville can't buy a win, and then they finally win. Just so many different things that are just throwing me off my stride. It has me a little discombobulated, so to speak. And it's kind of sandwiched because I did an absolutely expert job of betting 2 weeks ago. And the week before that, I was garbage. And the week before this last one, I was garbage. I won all 3 weeks. But 2 of those 3 weeks, I bet like a moron, in my opinion. And it's just frustrating. Are you having any trouble bringing yourself to the betting window this year? Or are you finding any alterations in how you're betting?
Well, I have a good story and a bad story. So the good story is really thanks to us, thanks to you, having really, I always feel prepared because I do so much work in July and August, more than anybody, more than most people. So I'm raring to go week one. And so the golf hole was pretty big early, and I was hitting I started 12-1 and I kept going. And I knew kind of when to throw back a little bit after those first 4 weeks after the quartile. And so when I've had trouble, I've still gone 2-1, or 1 week I didn't have any straight plays. I know I got criticized for that, saying, where's your plays and stuff? But nothing kind of jumped out. And last week, only 2 or 3 plays. So I kind of feel good about that. What was interesting is that on our Friday show with Ted, it was stunning that I misread the market on the Colts in a way. Jonathan Taylor is announced out of the game. I advised people to play it at 5 and 5.5, and immediately went to 6. And then by game day, it was down to 4.5. I didn't see that coming. In one respect, it's an old adage that I've used, I don't know how many times. Running backs don't move the win needle. And so Jonathan Taylor, I have a feeling sharp people said, hey, who cares if Jonathan Taylor is out? He's just a running back. And they knocked the point spread down to 5 and 4.5. The problem was I couldn't get my 5, 5.5, 7 middle, which I thought I was going to get. But New England became a play based on the numbers. There was no business that against a relative unknown at quarterback and somebody that Belichick can scheme against, that Indianapolis should have been 4.5 or 5 point favorites. So I ended up knocking the play down, buying off half the play, and ended up with a half play on New England. But it's funny that I misread the market there. And I think in terms of your first slide there, your first banner about football oddity, I think misreading the market is becoming a little irritating to me personally, because I'm misreading more than I ever used to do. That's just a personal opinion, that why am I not seeing this, or what am I missing?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not having as much trouble. The market's not working against me at all.
But did you see New England actually coming down? Did you think that was going to happen? I just didn't think.
Yeah, my metrics had the Colts. If that line had gone up any higher, I would have been on the Colts. But no, my numbers showed that that's where the line should have been going. Unfortunately, I didn't play the Colts. Yeah. But my numbers have been darn good. I have I've got a couple problems with a couple of teams right now where I'm 20 spots off of what other people have a couple of teams rated. And I'm not going to discuss them, unfortunately. I hate to tease that way because I just, that's just the way I want to see what happens. But I have a couple of teams that are 20 spots off of what other people are rating them. And I've done very well. We both had the Rams. We both told people the Rams were no good before.
Right.
We both told people that Green Bay was no good, and we had to argue with people. We had the lead on Chicago. Tennessee was a huge disappointment because I was on that. And as much as I preached about Tennessee and how they've never been any good, I pivoted right away. I won the week before with Tennessee, and I planned on coming in. It was going to be the biggest bet of the year against Kansas City, and you got to deal with this Tannehill nonsense, and I had to back off. And what do? They go out and win outright and spoil the whole thing. So that's kind of frustrating. I've got two other teams in the hopper that I believe that I'm ahead of market on, but they're so far off that it's ridiculous. And that's one of the problems we have on the metric side of things. And I've actually in process this week reaching out to a handful of other people that I know must be showing similarities on that, and trying to adapt to that is difficult. I mean, how many times can you ride Jacksonville? Jacksonville's metrics are off the charts. I don't know what to do with them anymore. I mean, sure, they won last week, but they lost 4 weeks in a row for me before that. So, do you have any thoughts on Jacksonville at all?
Well, I wasn't off one way or the other on Jacksonville. I'd have to look at my sheet to see if I've even been betting them. I think I was 1-0 on them or going against them, and I don't think I've even bet on them this year. I'll have to look as we're speaking. My thoughts on Jacksonville, if I'm way off on a team, usually the power ratings will regress to the mean. Either I'll adjust because Vegas is right or the offshore is right, or they'll adjust to me. So if you're 20 points off on a team and you feel you're ahead of market, then they have to adjust to you. Yeah. Jacksonville, I had Denver against Jacksonville in that couple weeks ago, but otherwise I was on Jacksonville against the Chargers way back, week 3. And this week, I mean, I'm not necessarily giving out plays right now because I'm still incorporating data, but this week is almost a play on for Jacksonville for me, just to let you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so. It's the Jacksonville. I'll just tell people up front, the Jacksonville metrics are just absurd. I've never seen anything like it. They are just literally laughably excellent versus what the team is actually going to do or is capable of doing or what their win-loss has shown. So that's a difficulty that I'm having to deal with is, well, at what point, I can't quit you.
Well, if you take the names off the jerseys, if you don't know who Pat Mahomes is or Andy Reid, and you look just at the numbers, the key numbers that I'm looking at, there's not a heck of a lot of difference between the two teams.
I'm glad that you said that. Because I'm wondering whether I'm living in some alternate reality because that's what I'm showing also. And it's impossible. These two teams are not the same quality, but if you look at the numbers, there are not very many differences. And you're looking at basically a double-digit spread here.
Yeah. In this particular case, it's not a good situation for KC. The metrics say that Jacksonville shouldn't be favored by that many points.
And I mean Kansas City.
Yeah, Kansas City. I mean, yeah, the metrics say that they shouldn't be that much if you just look at the pure numbers. If you look at the situation, there's a situation that goes against Kansas City. And if you look at the power numbers, it slightly favors Jacksonville as well, and it would favor them at 10.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just, I guess we're both admitting we're a little bit off our stride and there's some goofy stuff going on. I'm happy. We're both in the positive nicely and at least that's okay. But it just always a sweat job and there's just lower confidence this year, so to speak. It's the power of NFL efficiency and NFL markets that you have to always respect. It scares the bejesus out of you.
Well, one thing I would like to mention, and it's been a great year. I mean, it's been a great year for me in the NFL, but find out who Jerome Boger is refereeing and stay off the game. His game was Washington last week. The referee interfered with that particular play, caused a 7-point score in that game and if you saw pictures of the receiver, he's getting up and he's going, what? I mean, he was in place possibly to either tip the ball or intercept the ball in front of the receiver.
I've got an email in my box somebody sent me on the referee data that I need to check out later this afternoon. But I have not. I think I lied and said I was going to incorporate referee data before the season started. I had all the intentions, but not the time, and really haven't gotten involved in it. But I still feel it's something that we should both be looking at and considering. You mentioned it 2 weeks ago when the Lions had a certain referee that was very penalty heavy. It was against Miami, and they had 6 penalties in the second half immediately, which buried them. So the umpire data, referee data, I think it's important. Moving on, where do you want to go from here? You want to look at some divisions? You want to look at a few matchups? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, let's go in divisions, and let's preface it by saying that if you've been listening or watching our show, you may have picked up some nuggets that we've actually placed. You and I have placed in-season bets after this kind of discussion. Yeah. Remember, after week 2 and after week 4, we said, well, wait a second, we should take San Francisco now. Because San Francisco, Trey Lance got hurt, and that elevated them in my eyes because they could take the training wheels off the team. We knew that the Rams weren't going to be any good. At least that's what we thought. We didn't know about Seattle being this good. No. Thank you for going over 5.5, though, as I was the lone wolf in that particular thing. But hopefully they won't win the division.
Yeah, but if you recall, you actually laughed at me when I pointed out that it was before Atlanta took the divisional lead. You laughed at me, and I said, how can you not play Atlanta at this point? This and this and this can happen, and this and this and this happened. And Atlanta took the lead in the division.
Well, I have to tell you that of all I'm just thrilled with all the 8 plays I've made in season. Atlanta was not one of them. So I kept waiting for the Atlanta to lose. Of course, they won in weird ways, like in that Carolina game, extra point, field goal, all that other stuff. But I'll probably take a loss on Atlanta as far as season wins. But I made no adjustments in that division. So if I laughed, what can I tell you? Can't win them all.
While we're talking about that, though, Thursday night football. You got anything on this Thursday night football? Atlanta, Carolina.
Yeah, something, it's a rematch from just a couple of weeks ago when Atlanta barely pulled it out. So you're thinking, oh, Carolina has all the momentum in this game. They could do damage in this spot. I got to tell you, speaking of metrics, the metrics are pretty close according to what I see. But the situation really favors Atlanta, actually, on my end. I don't know what you feel about it. But there's...
knowing you for a decade plus, that's an extreme oddity for you to show value on the divisional road favorite. So
extreme oddity. First of all, I only bet favorites probably 1 out of 3 times at most, and road favorites probably a little bit less. Although home field advantage, we know the last 2-3 years has shrunk so much that I no longer break it down in categories as I used to, in terms of, I can't possibly play a road favorite. No, that doesn't come into play anymore. The fact of the matter is, I have a situation that really favors Carolina in this game. And I think they're the more well-oiled team to begin with in terms of what they're asking Mariota to do, what he's capable of doing against this particular team. I don't have your thoughts on it yet, but they should be able to run freely on Carolina.
I'm trying to control my scroll. I lost the line in the game.
Should be
it should be a
3.
flat 3, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that's its tipping point, because there is no possible way that it should be played over 3.
No, I agree with you, and this does not fit into my play category. I think they're going to be better off because what's his name came off the DL, and I think they're going to move off of PJ, and you've got either Baker or what's his name,
Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Darnold.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, yeah. So we're both kind of in the same boat. You're going to actually put a play on Atlanta, though, huh? Minus the 3.
I'm waiting because I want to see where it goes. Because if it goes to 3.5, I don't mind missing out on the play.
Right.
And I say, no, that's not what I want to be. I don't want to be on that side, and so on. I use Friday's odds to determine whether or not it fits in a certain category. So that's a wait. Sometimes I'll make a play because it's already in a category that I like, and I know based on my power ratings, I've got the best value I'm going to get. So I'm waiting, and I will definitely make it a play under 3. I will probably make it a play at 3.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I lean your way. It brings me to another topic of getting into the market at the wrong times, and I've had some discussions with people far smarter than I am about this, and I've asked them. I go, well, why did you take this line now? You have nothing to lose. I mean, if you're sitting there at 2.5 and you jump the gun and you take a plus 2.5, what's the most you're going to lose? Are you not going to catch the 2? Are you not going to catch the 1.5? The value of hopefully getting that 3 is just exponentially worth it. To just be patient. And I see people pulling the trigger at some odd times and not having the patience to stand their ground and get their numbers. And you just have to weigh the risk and reward of, okay, if I lose this number, how important is losing this number versus potentially gaining this number that it's right next to? And I can't recommend enough to people to consider these things. The difference between 5.5, 6, the difference between 2.5 and 3. Just very important. The difference between 9.5, 10 is important. It's very important.
Yeah, that's extremely well said. And Tampa and the Rams were an example last week. Tampa was my side. It was the play I liked the best. It opened at 2.5. I didn't want to risk it going to 3. So I took it at 2.5, which turned out to work out in my favor, thanks to whatever the Rams were doing the last minute of that particular game. So I actually did add a little bit of 3. I will admit that at the end, because I saw it as an even stronger play. So that part pushed, but the value of getting it at 2.5 was there. Now, sometimes I've sat on a line, like in a college game. Texas State played Louisiana Monroe. And I kept waiting for Texas State to get to 3. So I pulled the trigger 2 minutes before the game. It never got to 3. I ended up laying minus 105 at 2.5. And strangely, they only lost by 1. They were winning something like by 20 or 21. So they blew the whole game, but luckily they didn't blow, they lost by 1. But I still was willing to wait in that case and risk going. I mean, it was 2 minus 115. So I don't think I was risking too much that it was going to 2.5. I mean, minus 115. So I don't think I was risking much that it was going to go down.
Well, and this topic touches on 2 of the big mistakes I did make last week that were just infuriating to me. And that is, I was looking at the Minnesota minus 2.5, minus 120. I think it was Sunday night. against Washington, and I didn't pull the trigger, and never saw another 2.5 afterward. I missed that, so that really was frustrating. And then people that follow me, they didn't get the Atlanta plus 3.5 from me, and it's just like there's just no excuse for it. And I just, 2 games that pushed that could have been wins. I don't care how much money I made last week. Those are just critical mistakes you cannot make, and just beat my head against the wall for it. Looking at the AFC divisional, I got a funny feeling Allen is more hurt than they're letting on at this point. He did miss 4 weeks, I think, in his rookie year with the same injury. It is his throwing arm. Why would you put him in the lineup this week if you need this guy in the lineup at the end of the year? If he damages it anymore, he's going to be gone. There's just the risk reward just isn't there for me. I think this week I think they're going to sit him out. I mean, I could very well be wrong, but I don't know how you play that guy this week. And I think that he's going to end up sitting. What do you think? Any thoughts? You've seen anything?
The initial line movement kind of suggests that he's not going to play. As far as pulling the trigger on divisional odds and stuff like that, I only like to pull the trigger on divisional odds when it's 1 against 1. And in this case, you can make a case that all 4 of the teams would be in the race if there was anything that went wrong with Josh Allen. They're 0-2 in the division, if I read it correctly. Both road losses, tough road losses at humid Miami, and then last week against the Jets. So divisional record-wise, they're actually not sitting as pretty as they would like to be.
Let's see. 6. Geez, the Jets are only 1 game behind them and have the win over them.
Yeah, they're 0-2 in the division.
Yep.
I can see the chart right there. So they're in the worst shape divisional wise. Eventually they're going to get their cornerback White back, who hasn't played it down this year, because right now their pass defense percentage, this is another trick where you don't want to keep relying on last year's data. We all remember Buffalo's number 1 pass D last year, but it's middle of the pack right now in some metrics right now. So you can only go by what's going on this year. And until White comes back and he's completely healthy, Buffalo is not the standout defensive team against the pass as we've all thought they might be.
It's a wild and wacky division because the Patriots were a big letdown 2 weeks ago, and then they come on, strong the week before that. And this past week, the Dolphins are getting to be one of those scary teams that you're going to start to find value betting against, I believe, because people are so scared of that offense. And the Jets are the Jets. It's a little disappointing to see what the Jets did last week, because I knew the Jets were a hell of a lot better. We discussed it before than what people thought they were. And, that balloon is popped for value. I think people will take the Jets a little bit more seriously, even with that horrible quarterback situation.
Let's give us a pat on the back for the Friday show with Ted. I threw Ted a question, made sure he asked Matthew Slater about special teams with New England. Once again, that, for whatever you want to say about New England's roster and how good or how bad they are, they blocked a punt in the Indianapolis game that changed it. And basically, if you believe special teams matter, then New England still matters.
That's true. But I think that division is a little bit, as you pointed out, is a little bit more complicated than people want to admit. Just getting back to the Buffalo, though, rumor has it that line's going to go down to about 2.5 or 3.
Yeah, who is the backup? That's the question. And how much is he worth on a team does not run the ball?
Case Keenum.
Oh, okay. So that's good backup. I mean, that's his role. I mean, I think he can handle that, because a Buffalo quarterback is not babied. They throw the ball 35 to 40 times a game, and he's got to be prepared to do that against a mini defense that is not that good against the pass. They're good at rushing the quarterback, really good, but they're not good at defending the pass. So that's an
I'm
interesting matchup.
I'm hoping that Allen is out and that line goes to 2.5 or 3, and I will be a Buffalo Bills fan this weekend if that happens.
If you lay out that scenario, I'll be right there with you.
Baltimore is looking pretty tasty for us now. We've got the divisional futures. I've got the conference futures. The Bengals are 5-4 right behind them, but Baltimore, they've got a timely bye ahead of them, which will help them out, I think. And they have the bye ahead of them, right?
Yeah, but both Baltimore and Cincinnati are off this week.
Oh, okay. So, yep, you're right. What do you make of that Browns performance last? Is that a mirage or is this Browns defense back? I mean, we ridiculed them last week and we spoke about them. Are they making a resurgence? Can we put any trust in them? How did what did you make out of that?
Are you talking about the Browns or the?
Yeah, the Browns.
Okay, the Browns. Did they? I don't even think they played last week. Did they?
They beat Cincinnati.
Oh yeah, the week before, the Monday.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are they? Well, they're certainly capable of it. They have the talent to turn it around defensively. Now, I don't know what we find out against Miami, who's a well-oiled offensive machine. I mean, that offense is incredible. It's built for Tua and so on. This will be a tough task. When they get back to bad weather, kind of, turf football where the winds are up, it gets cold in Cleveland and stuff like that. I think the Cleveland defense is built for that. They're probably not necessarily built to go into Miami and show us something. If they show us something, that's great. They have 3 more games before a rusty Deshaun Watson comes back. I would think their goal would be at least 2-1, if not 3-0. I think they're capable of that. It's probably a good rest week for them to implement some more stuff. Kareem Hunt stayed with the team, so they got Hunt and Chubb in the backfield.
Well, there's no value in betting that division, that's for sure.
No, it's already been done, and I hedged it a very small with Cincinnati anyway. I still think it's a 2-team race. Baltimore has the better schedule, but Cincinnati has a really good team and a tricky schedule.
Boy, I'll tell you, I don't know how the Titans could possibly lose this division at this point.
Yeah, somewhere we must have talked, because I have a ticket on Tennessee plus 200 to win the division, and I don't know when that happened. I said, "What? Did I misbet the team or something?" Because I was not one of those people who liked Indy, but I was also not one of those people who liked Tennessee, Jacksonville, or Houston either. I just didn't like the division. So,
I mean, take a look at this, where you don't have a single team in the AFC South with more than one divisional victory. The Titans are 3-0. They've beaten the Colts twice. Yeah. They do have a more difficult schedule ahead of them, but it would be a miracle for Jacksonville Jacksonville would just have to practically run the table. The Colts would have to run the table. Boy, I'll tell you, laying 3-1 on the Titans actually doesn't look that horrible. Not that I'm going to do it, but boy, that's in the neighborhood.
Well, I think Jacksonville could, you alluded to that and all the times that the metrics said like Jacksonville, but they still have to learn how to win. That's the difference between them being where they are right now and them being right smack in the race. They need a year to really develop and hone in on that roster and get everything right. They have some missing pieces still. But if Tennessee plays Willis any more weeks, it's going to be a problem, because he has completed 11 passes in 2 weeks total, none to the wide receivers last week. So it's kind of a Band-Aid approach trying to get by with coaching and defense. I think Tennessee is not that good a team, but they're in the right division.
Well, I go back and I've always been, one that says the Titans are overrated. I think they're actually underrated at the moment, believe it or not. And I'll tell you one thing that was heard. I forget who said it, but gee, this is just an awful comment to make. The Jacksonville head coach made a reference to that the wins and the losses aren't important at this point. So that's very alarming as a bettor, that his concern is he's not concerned with wins and losses at this point. Wouldn't you agree?
It's a concerning comment. Despite, let's say they win the division, and they really should. Even in that cushy division, they could end up with a 4th seed, because they're just not going to match up against. They do match up against Kansas City. They played well against them in the past. But against some of these other teams, I still think when it comes down to it, they're probably going to be the number 4 seed, host the number 5 seed in the first round of the division, and then go from there. Of course, they were the number 1 seed last year, and we both thought that was ridiculous.
Well, I changed the topic on you. I was referencing the Jacksonville head coach was making those comments.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a growing team, he doesn't want his team to get disillusioned by any losing streak. I think that's more psychological play within his team when somebody says that than anything else.
So you think it's disingenuous, and it brushes off your shoulder as far as betting them.
Yeah, well, it's not a ringing endorsement for handicappers, but it's telling his team, let's just grow 1 week at a time.
Well, we've got Kansas City at 6-2, and they're looking pretty darn good. They've they got a lot of flash. I don't know why they're so scary. Their metrics aren't completely off the charts or anything, but and they're only leading the Chargers by 1 game. I don't know how the Chargers just won't go away. But this minus 600 is just absolutely absurd. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, well, I don't think you went off on an island with me. After the Chargers lost to Kansas City, I took out a Charger ticket, not knowing that half their team would be hurt after that game, losing the left tackle, losing a second wide receiver, losing a defensive back, losing Bosa. So somebody should have told me that beforehand. What do we got on the Chargers right now?
Plus 550.
Aye. So I got something like plus 220, and I'm still feeling okay with that ticket. And now you're really going to offer me plus 550? Oh my goodness. Not that it's going to. What would you say the chances of them winning the division are? 1 in 3? Is that fair?
Well, even if it's 1 in 4, that's a bargain.
Yeah. So that means you're going to lose more often than you're going to win. But in my opinion, you have value.
And the Chargers have 2 divisional wins.
Plus 550.
Isn't that seems out of whack, doesn't it?
And the reason it seems out of whack is because the other 2 teams do not really pose threats to win the division.
Right.
So I'd rather have it, like I said, a 2-team race. And if you can concentrate on one versus the other, and they're 1 game apart, and all Kansas City has is a home win against the Chargers.
What's really bizarre is my perception of the Chargers is so poor. They're 4-1 in their last 5 games. That's why it's important to sometimes take a look at the standings, because if you're just looking at the point spreads week to week, you kind of forget that some teams are skating by. But boy, how the hell are they 4-1 and we have such a low opinion of them? I mean, they're basically a mash unit. If they ever get healthy, they could be dangerous again. They're just sitting pretty. It just reminds me of that horse that you're not paying attention to, that's just sitting, against the rail in second.
Yeah. No, the issue with the Chargers is they don't have true home field advantage at all.
Right.
So you don't get that. But they are a good road team, so it kind of mitigates that a little bit. So
I have a little buyer's remorse on my. I took Dallas Cowboys, I think, plus 250 for a little bit on one of our first excursions through the divisional odds. I think it's going to be pretty hard to catch Philly at this point.
Yeah, I've got nothing on the division regarding divisional odds. I have a small play on the Giants season win total that's almost undoubtedly going to lose within the next 2 weeks. And
on the under?
On the under. Yeah. And I never bought into them as being all the numbers that I recorded the first 3 or 4 weeks said they'll come back to the pack. They'll come back. They'll come back. So I didn't try to get off that play at all. So that's what I have. I don't have anything else on the division other than a Washington under and a New York Giant under for season wins.
Yeah, there's nothing to do there. I think that nothing's really changed over the last couple of weeks. We know the Philadelphia is Philadelphia. The Dallas had a good win recently. I think that they're pretty solid. They've got a remote chance of doing some damage in the playoffs. The Giants, I don't think we're believers on. They could back into the playoffs somehow. They're supposed to go 7-2 after this week.
Yeah.
But it's just still non-believers in them, same as you, Ron. We look at the NFC North. That's all but wrapped up at this point. We argued about the Packers. I told you they were garbage, and they're garbaggio beans.
Yeah, well, we had a funny exchange, offline where I said I'm holding my nose. I'm betting the Lions, and then when the Lions failed on 4th and 2, I said to you, I hate the Lions. So it was not recorded. I said maybe we should record this, but the Lions were absolutely the right play last week. They still scare you when you play them. At least they scare me when I play them. But they were in an incredibly good situation. And the Packer, and forget the situations. There was nothing that you could like about a Packer team that's scoring at the level that they're scoring. 17 points per game.
Well, and I think Rodgers is dinged up again. Their injuries this week are bad.
Yeah. They lost Gary, their sacker.
Yeah, they lost a lot more than just the game. I think that they, I think that things went so poorly that they potentially have lost their will to win at this point. I'll be very interested to see how they come out the next game they play, because it could just be a real disaster going forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, their schedule is such everybody continued to think even before the Detroit game that they could go on this run. After all, it's Aaron Rodgers and so on, but their body language tells you that they may be done. They're playing other easier teams, but they're an easy team too. They can't defend the run. They can't get Rodgers on the field in rhythm. And even if he is in rhythm, he has one banged up receiver that he trusts and no one else.
Well, I don't think any of those people that told me that last week that Minnesota would be 1.5 on a neutral against Green Bay are going to stand by that anymore.
No, and I was middle of the pack. I didn't think they would be 7.5 on neutral. Right. That was out of whack. But 4 was my number.
I still said 6, and people still probably wouldn't make them 6, but I would. Tampa Bay showed signs of life. Do you? In your history of betting, do you think the way that game ended can kind of be a springboard for Tampa Bay, or do you think this team is as bad as they have looked?
I think they're going to put up the divisional odds for them, because this will be interesting.
-10.
Okay. Yeah, that might be short. I know that sounds strange, but New Orleans with Dennis Allen at coach is a completely different offensive machine. They have lost their ability to scheme without Sean Payton in the building. They can go only so far with Andy Dalton. All their receivers are banged up. To me, they're a non-factor. Carolina's a non-factor. And Atlanta's a great story. But if they have to come from behind in a game, they don't trust Mariota to throw more than 20 times a game. And like I've said, you can roll this back to 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17. Atlanta does not put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They are always in the bottom 5. Last year, they had 18 for the whole year. This year, they have 12 so far in 8 or 9 games played. So Tampa, Brady is all in now. That was the jump start for him. He doesn't have to worry about family life. He doesn't have to worry about anything else. He still has Godwin and Evans. how many teams would love to have Godwin and Evans on
Yeah,
their
but Evans
roster?
can't catch the ball. How many drops did he have last game?
Yeah, the focus wasn't good, but they're going to play worse defenses than the Rams moving forward, especially in the division. I could see Tampa flirting with 10, 11 wins, hopefully not running the table, of course. But I think Tampa is going to be the clear divisional winner.
Where do you have the Seattle Tampa Bay line on your numbers?
I have the line correct. Although it's hard to handicap Germany games. I have a sample size of 0 for Germany games. And I hate to play those type of situations. I hope they all have a fun trip and they don't get hurt and they come back and whatever. But this is not a game I'm particularly focusing on. If the spread was way off from my numbers, I would play it. But I personally, nothing. What about you?
So you think 2.5, 3 is fair, is right in line with your numbers?
Not 3, but because I would make it 2 neutral.
Okay. This is gonna be one of those mind bender games for me because the metrics are clearly on Seattle, but you've got a situation of that the way that Tampa Bay won that last game, it could be that springboard game. But what Seattle has done on defense this last 4 weeks is just astounding, and you have to respect it.
Yeah, the other piece of good news is Seattle does rush the quarterback effectively. And if you don't rush Brady, you're in big trouble. The Rams rushed him and forced him to throw real quick passes. He didn't trust staying in the pocket. That's what Seattle has to do metrically. They have to do the same thing to Tom Brady. They have to make him uncomfortable.
I don't know what I'm going to do in that game yet. It's but as far so you see the value in Tampa.
I've got to think of it. What are my chances? I would say there's a 4 out of 5 chance off the top of my head that Tampa wins the division. So that would be equivalent to minus 400.
Yeah, but it's not out of the question that I don't think it's out of the question at all that Atlanta wins this week and Tampa could lose this week and still be 4-6.
Well, in that case, you get more value by waiting a week.
Well, on Tampa, yeah.
Yeah. You think, so a question for you. Do you think what Atlanta has been doing based on your numbers is sustainable for the whole season?
Well, this is a season like no other. So,
yeah.
But their metrics aren't that high. And they've got a last place schedule. I mean, they get the privilege of playing mediocre teams the rest of the year, and Tampa, still has some tough competition ahead of them. Atlanta's a lot more live than you would think.
Yeah, I power rated them pretty low. I mean, there's at least 20 teams more valued than me in power ratings than Atlanta.
Oh, let's see here. I've got Atlanta 18th.
Okay, so I probably have them around 21st or 20. I think I have them 22nd. So if you can win the division with the 22nd best power rating, boy, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. So last but not least, my San Francisco 49ers are 4-4. Seattle's 6-3 and could be 7-3. I haven't looked at the divisional odds, or I didn't take note of it, but I imagine San Francisco's still favored, right? Yeah,
they should be favored. Okay, so we got them, I think, about plus 150, and that was with Seattle kind of out of the picture. But you'd have to say Seattle's in the picture now, even though it's kind of weird. Boy, the Rams are 11-1. How the mighty have fallen.
Yeah, and I hope they keep falling because the Lions have their pick. So hopefully the Lions can draft 2 quarterbacks in this quarterback-rich draft, and one of them will work out.
So if the Rams hold on and win against Tampa last week, don't you think that line is closer to 4 or 5-1?
Oh, of course.
because the mindset is completely different. They're still within hailing distance of San Francisco, but that one game, that one result in the last minute really changed everything for the Rams.
Well, I'm just disappointed I didn't have money on the game. It's but what can we do? Enough with the divisional odds. You wanted to talk about Colts and Raiders. Let's talk about Colts and Raiders.
Okay. Not the game in particular, because Ted and you and I are going to talk about that game when it comes up. So I have said what I wanted to say about the Colts already. I read the market wrong, but it won me money instead of cost me money. And running backs just do not move the needle. But I tweeted out something earlier today, a couple hours before the show, that I saw where the Raiders are releasing another first round pick. And the big issue there is drafts matter. And when you have 3 or 4 consecutive bad drafts, it kills your roster. Now you can rent a team like the Rams rented a Super Bowl last year, but they still drafted Aaron Donald and they drafted a couple of the other guys. The Raiders have actually given up on just about every first round pick that they've had in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's killing their team. And somebody was asking, well, is Carr, and this is what I want to ask you, because I think Carr is still an above average quarterback. And I think McDaniels is an okay coach. He hasn't proven to be terrible or whatever in terms of decision making. I just think the roster is in a complete mess. Why do you think, and I'm going to add something after you talk, but why do you think the Raiders are where they are? Is it drafting? Is it coaching? Is it quarterbacking? Why do you have them, or where do you have them?
You know what? I think that it's a matter of circumstance because, obviously you had the tragedy last year, and you've got new coaching, you had the coaching changeover, you had the relocation process. You just, I at this point, I think you scrap it all. I think you start over, and you're exactly right. And look at the difference. Seattle hits a home run going deep into their draft this year, and look how fast you can turn around if you know how to draft properly. And if Seattle's doing that with second, third, fourth round picks, and the Raiders are losing first and second round picks, and you can't overcome this. Free agency is not going to help you out. Devontae Adams, he didn't even have a catch in the second half last week, did he?
I think he had one, if I remember correctly. I mean, he lit it up at the beginning, but they couldn't hold the lead against Jacksonville. I mean, at that point, Jacksonville is in hurry-up mode, catch-up mode. Lawrence has been interception prone or turnover prone this year, and the Raiders couldn't do a thing about it because their pass rush is 32nd in the NFL, 9 sacks, and it was expected to be much better. And all these number 1 draft choices from the secondary are gone.
Well, the Raiders are number 32 on my list on defense over the last 5 weeks. They're number 28 on offense. They're number 32 overall, trailing last 5 weeks. And I have them for the season. Boy, they're still high, though. Jesus, something's wrong here. I still have them middle of the pack for the season somehow, though.
Well, there's a correlation between getting to the passer and allowing pass completions. So they're last in both. They've allowed 70.5% completions. That's how you cannot protect a lead, when 7 out of every 10 passes are completed. But let me go back to something we both talked about. Well, all the way back in March when you asked the question, what the hell is Pythagorean theorem? And we had those 2 shows on it. The Raiders are a case study for why Pythagorean theorem matters and why I never discussed it until this year, because I hid it in my pocket and I wouldn't discuss it with anybody. But the Raiders were 10-7 last year, and they had the metrics, a point differential of a 7-10 team. And that's where you should have started the season with, that they're a 7-10 team with a coaching change, no draft picks, a roster that had, and their 2022 draft was horrendous to begin with. They had 4 overtime wins last year.
Mm-hmm.
You think that's sustainable?
No. And I was never a believer in this Raiders team. I don't know why anybody was. In the Pythag theory is out. Everybody, the cat's out of that bag.
So, yeah, cat's out. That's why I decided to go public with it to begin with, because it was no longer a secret. But like I said on the shows, it's not just Pythag. You combine it with schedule strength and you combine it with turnover data, and you can get a bigger picture of where somebody's regressing or not. And all the Vegas casinos had, offshore, the number was 8.5, but in Vegas, their number was 9 because it's their home team. And to ask them to get to 10-7, I just couldn't understand it.
I don't know what we were thinking. I never thought that they had a hope of hitting 10 wins. I never, ever did. And I don't know why I don't have any Raiders under. What they're doing now is exactly what I expected them to do. And I fell for the banana in the tailpipe of everybody else's narrative instead of going with what I actually thought. I never thought they'd do well.
I tried to convince you with all that stuff. I mean, but it wasn't just that. It was just that at the beginning of the year, remember how high we were on the division?
Yeah.
Including Denver in some respects, but certainly Kansas City and the Chargers, who had a very high, but their number was like 9.5, 10.5 or something, 10.5 in some cases for season wins. So they had a much tougher schedule this year than last year, in my opinion. And they had all this Pythag going against them. We'll talk more about them on Friday.
Well, what I think, where I was looking and where I was wrong, is I thought Kansas City would be could potentially fall to last place in that division. I just thought that they would have an off year, and obviously I'm wrong. So,
2 good drafts. Drafting matters even for Andy Reid.
The Colts.
That's all I have on the Colts. We'll talk more about them on Friday.
What did we talk about the Colts?
Talked about the fact that, we could talk about the coaching change. I talked about Jonathan Taylor and that running backs didn't matter and the line moved down. But what do you think about that whole thing about the coaching change, and how does it affect your handicapping? Let's bring it into gambling. How does that affect what you're doing this week and moving forward on Indy?
Well, I'm curious about how the team views. You have 2 former head coaches on that staff that were overlooked as interim coaches. You pulled basically a figurehead Saturday out of broadcasting to take over. What effect do you think that has on the locker room?
Well, I mean, apparently he's a great guy, and that I think they were looking for an out of the box change. But as far as handicapping goes, I've got to tell you, I'm not running to the window to play them against teams where they have to. I mean, the Raiders, we'll talk about that again on Friday. And this is not a team that you have to heavy strategize against. But in the future, when they're going against teams that play better defense or are more cohesive and stuff like that, I'm not running to the window to play the Colts right now.
No, nobody is. And I think that we will see a 7 pop up on that game. I'll be interested to see who's willing to dive in on that. And we'll talk about that on Friday. We talked about Seattle, Tampa Bay. We talked about Dallas and Green Bay. We talked about the Colts and the Raiders. We talked about Thursday night football. We talked about divisional outlooks. What else is there?
Well, there's not any other compelling game where both teams are really in the running. Other than, you want to talk, I think we closed talking maybe slightly about Monday night. Washington still thinks it's in the playoff picture. Philadelphia is riding a perfect record. Anything you want to say about Monday night?
I think that the average person will look at that line and will be all over Washington like a bad rash. I have to believe the line has to come down. Not necessarily deserving to come down. What about you?
I think the line on a regular Sunday would have been a little high, but this is a Monday game.
Right.
And this is a situation where Philadelphia is certainly not going to look past Washington because it's a standalone game. You and I have talked about the value of standalone games. So you're not going to get that situation, oh, you got a big favorite, and we don't really care. Now, does that mean they're going to cover 11 points? That's up for debate. But I think you're going to get Philly's best effort, and Philly's best effort is better than what Washington can put on the table.
I think, but I kind of look at it the other way, where I count on Washington's best effort.
They will give that.
What?
They will give that. I agree.
Yeah. You've got the home team giving max effort, and Philadelphia does not have any reason to win by margin. It's a really tough game to play the favorite, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I bumped up home field advantage because it's Monday night and it's a divisional game. So this is one of the rare instances that I gave a full 1.5 to home field advantage, which seems low in the olden days, but it's high right now. I'm pretty sure I won't have a play on this particular game. One thing that's interesting, it may not come into play in this game, but the second best turnover ratio in the league is +6. The best turnover ratio in the league is Phillies. Want to guess?
+13.
+15.
Wow.
After 8 games or so, 9 in the season, 8 games I think they played.
So now we're expecting some negative regression where Philadelphia is going to piss away some points somehow.
Yeah, I think that'll come into play, especially after this game, because then obviously they're going to go a short week after this game. That's when turnover regression is more likely to happen, in my opinion. And their next game is unfortunately, the next game is at Indy.
Oh, God.
A troubled team. Here we go again. But there has to be some turnover regression. +15 is unsustainable.
That's one of the frustrating things with betting these games also is when you look at your charts and you find a couple of play against teams or a couple of play on teams, and you look at the schedule and they're playing each other and it's like, I
know. Wasn't it a downer when I said at Indy to you?
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. We went in not knowing what we were going to talk about. This was just a general conversation like we always have on our own, and hope people got some value out of it. I think it's important. You know what? I really found value the last time we went through these divisions, because that's a shortcut that I take. And I mentioned it 5 minutes ago. Look at the divisional standings. Look to see, in my head, just as a bettor, I've got such a bad vision of the Chargers. I didn't even realize they're 4-1 and only a game out of first place. Things like that are going to happen. You really have to be aware of the opportunities that teams have. And you really have to kind of center yourself. And I'm getting great value going through these divisions every few weeks or so to kind of reacquaint myself with not just week-to-week results, but what the overall product of win-loss is. I get so lost in the year-long stats and the week-to-weeks and such. There's just so much time in the week. So do you find yourself looking at the standings in years past in the divisions like we're doing this year, or is this helping you out also?
This is helping me out. Friends of mine used to joke with me. This happened in college all the time. I would go over games when more of my friends were in the wagering business and stuff like that. And I would say to them, I don't even know what their record is.
Right.
And literally, even now in a college, I'm more aware of their records, but I'm not as aware as I honestly don't know 30 or 40 of the college teams, what their records are, whether they're 1-8 or 3-6 and stuff like that. Handicapping nugget this week that I discovered in college that we won't talk about probably online, but offline we're going to talk about is A lot of coaches are coaching for their jobs this week. Never used to happen because coaches would be fired at the end of the year. But that's not true anymore. We've already
you've got to get rid of these. You've got to get rid
Yeah.
of these guys so that you know that so your space is available and you can start recruiting your next coach.
It's a business in
Yeah.
college. We know that. And 9 coaches are gone already this year. It used to be 1 coach would be gone by this time. And all the coaches would be gone right before the last game of the year or right after the last game of the year. Not true at all anymore. And I have 14 games where I'm paying attention to coaches on the hot seat this week in college. So that's kind of a new situation. And I have to figure out whether or not I'm going to handicap that game. Each game is different and each coach situation is different and who they're going against. But it's going to be fascinating to go over the college slate in a little bit more detail, knowing that this is the last week some of these coaches are going to be on the sideline.
Speaking of coaching, Campbell's starting to wear out his welcome a little bit, and it's just disappointing because, we kind of knew it would happen. We just had unrealistic expectations, but this guy's game management just is never going to be there without years of experience.
Yeah.
And they're going to be in a situation where they're going to be drafting a franchise quarterback next year. And boy, I just can't see the value of having a Jim Campbell or Dan Campbell running the show next year and having to guide a franchise quarterback. And we know that the Lions traditionally hold on to coaches other than Caldwell, at least a year too long.
You mentioned that you hope the Rams tank because they have a high draft pick. So this is a situation. The Jets and Seattle prove that you can get well quick with great drafts. Detroit has 12 defensive sacks this year. They can't defend the pass when they're trying to protect leads. I know that quarterback is an issue that they're going to address in the first round, but this draft team is under the microscope to make this whole roster better right now, or the coaching staff has to go, like you said, because they're not putting their defensive players in the proper position to improve the metrics on the defensive side of the ball. This is a situation where the Lions can make the playoffs next year, which sounds weird.
Oh, no, absolutely.
If Seattle could do it and if the Jets could do it halfway through the season, why can't the Lions do it?
The Lions have a very solid offensive line. They've been decimated by injuries. Offensively, if you put a decent quarterback in there, they're going to be okay. If they can load up on some defense, it's going to take some time to integrate, young defensive talent, but you can do it. Carroll's doing it with, rookies this year, so it's not impossible. And that's my point. Dan Campbell's not the guy that's going to be able to do it, I don't think.
It's a fixable situation, and I'm neutral on the coach, so I can't say anything. I'm not neutral on their defensive staff. I think it's not good, but they have got to get a free agent pass rusher like a Matt Judon who went to New England, like Von Miller who went various places. Get a veteran presence who knows how to win and teach others how to beat offensive linemen, and use that second, third round and your second pick in the first round for the best defensive player that you can do. I'm telling you, it's fixable, but either the coaching staff or the draft team has to be held accountable if it doesn't work.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. You have to have veteran leadership, and there isn't any veteran leadership on that team. Yeah. Last thing, Kingsbury's got to be the next one on the hot seat at this point. I don't see another coach in worse shape job-wise. What do you think?
Probably true. I think the Bidwells, they tend to be a little bit more passive in terms of letting it play out. He's probably not – if they don't make the playoffs, I don't think he comes back. But an in-season firing, it would take a couple of embarrassing performances at this point.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to fire him mid-season. Obviously, he re-signed him before this season. What a horrible decision. On that note, we're going to be back on Friday, and we're going to be discussing 2 interesting games amongst other issues. The Vikings at Buffalo. Funny story we'll tell on remember from last week. I said, boy, I wish I had that on tape. We'll reenact that. And Indy Las Vegas, not the most interesting game, but we'll have some other stuff to talk about. And until Friday, thanks for joining us. Hope you found some value in our discussions. See you soon.